next guest, the art of storytelling is founded on witnessing unsung heroes of peace in a world that is full of violence. For wildlife journalist and predator specialist Will Stolzenberg, those heroes are now proving by example that people and predators can coexist. With a few words and pictures, Will offers to us his perspective on the power of compassion.
Hello and good afternoon to all of my fellow optimists out there as we shelter in place, hiding for our lives from this invisible little monster we call the coronavirus. I am actually here to say a few words on behalf of some other bigger, more conventional sorts of monsters, the kind that come with fangs and claws and howl at the moon kind of monsters, but ones that nonetheless actually have a lot to do with this little one that now has our undivided attentions. The monsters I'm talking about are the ones that you're familiar with, the wolves and big cats and bears of the land, the great sharks and the killer whales of the sea, the eagles of the air, those big meat-eating beasts that for eons have occupied the tops of the global food chain, until we came along. Now these great predators, most of them are just occupying tiny fractions of their historical ranges and abundances, most of them gone because of a particular repeating pattern that seems to happen whenever we come along. We invade their homes, we drive away their prey, and then some of us like to come gunning for the survivors on the general philosophy that the only good predator is a dead predator. So the cynical response generally is, so what? Who needs them? But the scientist's response is, well, we do, quite a bit actually. Over the last 60 years, scientists have been looking into the lives of these animals and finding that quite a few of them are what we would call keystone species. Keystone species meaning that when you take them out of the mix, things tend to fall apart. Ecosystems unravel, pests and prey species run amok, and forests wither and die, plagues erupt, and people die. Cheery stuff, right? So how do you craft a compelling story out of that without your audience screaming for the exits or wanting to slit their wrists? If you were to hold a gun to my head and say, I want a one-word answer, I would say heroes. Those rare individuals who have been to hell and back, they've met their demons, and they return with this tale of redemption and transformation that inspires us, that gives us hope. Here's a couple examples of what I'm talking about. This is Carter Niemeyer. For 26 years, Carter was a hitman for the U.S. government arm of predator control that's now called Wildlife Services. Carter was a master trapper and a deadly shot when hunting wolves from helicopters, but he was also open to questioning his assumptions and challenging the status quo. And what he learned from examining scores of cattle kills and sheep kills, all of them, of course, invariably blamed on wolves, was that the wolves were actually responsible for very few of the losses. And as a supervisor, Carter stopped rubber stamping death warrants on innocent wolves, and just like that, he went from one of the wolves' most lethal assassins to one of its most potent champions. These days, instead of shooting wolves, he and his wife head up to the mountains near where they live in Idaho, and they howl for wolves, all for the simple thrill of hearing them howl in return. Many of my heroes walk on all fours. This is a cat we call Walker. Walker is a wild mountain lion who was born about 12 years ago now in the Black Hills of South Dakota, on the very eastern edge of the mountain lions range in North America. When he was just over a year old, a teenager in lion years, he left his mother and he set out to find a mate, as all young male mountain lions do. Only problem was Walker headed east over the plains, where mountain lions no longer live because they were extirpated about a century ago. And in fact, dozens of his predecessors in the hills had tried the same thing over the last decade. All of them disappeared, most of them gunned down. But somehow Walker survived this gauntlet. Over the next 18 months, Walker walked across South Dakota. He walked across Minnesota, through Wisconsin, through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, through Ontario, through the Adirondacks of New York. Walker passed within 20 miles of Manhattan before meeting his tragic end on a Connecticut highway. This cat walked for thousands of miles if you consider all of his meanderings, all of it in search of a mate who wasn't even there, as it turns out. All of this without having threatened or harmed a single human soul. Walker is one of the reasons that I write on the Predator's behalf. This cat is one of the reasons that I maintain hope. The story that these heroes have to tell me is that these great predators, they're not the monsters we should be worried about. The monsters we should be worried about are ones of our own creation. Exhibit A. So yeah, the coronavirus. This is a virus that we suspect jumped hosts in one of these wildlife markets. These markets where they scour the forests of wild animals and then slaughter and sell them in these open-air markets for what in many cases amount to bogus medicines and delicacies for the rich. The point is that these markets, they're not just factories of disease, they're indictments of our callousness, our indifference toward our fellow creatures around the globe. And that's, strangely enough, is our saving grace. The coronavirus isn't some meteor that fell out of the sky. It's something we created. It's something we can fix. The thing is, we don't need these wildlife markets where we're senselessly slaughtering these endangered and exploited animals. For that matter, we don't need factory farms where every day we torture billions of these beautiful sentient creatures when, in fact, we have far kinder and more efficient ways of feeding the world. We don't need predator killing contests. We need more predators. And to that end, what we need are more heroes. Heroes of tolerance and compassion to remind us that when we use this phrase, we are all in this together, we really does mean we. We with the 2 legs, 4 legs. We really are all in this together. And in my humble opinion, that's not just the story of our great predators. That's not just the story of this plague. That to me is the story of our times. And that is my storytelling sermon. So with that, stay safe everyone, with peace, goodwill, and compassion to all. Thank you.